Anyone who's watched this channel knows that I have two overarching obsessions: baseball and the sketch comedy show I Think You Should Leave. So please allow me to indulge myself by putting together my own Guys Turbo team. I've got a couple of managerial options here. Billy Martin, who, in one of the most memorable moments in 1980s baseball, went to the umpire and asked if they could explain to George Brett that they have a rule.
It basically says,
if you put pine tar on your bat, it can't extend further than the width of home plate, which of course led George Brett to become the maddest anyone has ever been. Or we could go with Tony La Russa, who had some unfortunate troubles with DUIs, but who also seems like a real kind-hearted guy who started an animal rescue foundation. So he seems like the sort of guy who would just like to
do something good this morning before alcohol class.
At catcher, we have to go with AJ Pierzynski, a guy with
spiked up blonde hair, little bitty jeans, chicken spaghetti at Ciccolinis.
Maybe he used to be a piece of shit.
said what?
But people can change. First base, Miguel Cabrera. Miggy's career derailed in 2017 when he was diagnosed with 2 herniated discs. He could have greatly benefited from treatment by the laser spine specialist to help him be able to lift his son over his head like a big boy. Second base, gotta go with Jonathan India here, a guy whose hair kind of looks like dog ears.
It appears my barber may have been looking at a picture of a dog when he gave me this haircut.
Third base, George Brett. I Think You Should Leave is not above a bit of toilet humor, and neither are we, as I relish every opportunity to bring up George Brett's hilarious pants-shitting story at the Bellagio. So let's get all the mud pies out of our system right here. I hope George wouldn't have an issue with us joking about his problems with incontinence.
What's the joke? Brown pudding in my shoes, make it look like I shooted diarrhea down my leg, make me think I'm mighty sick?
I'm good twice a year for that.
Shortstop, Carlos Correa. Break out the stanzos.
They're stanzos. They're nice.
Carlos Correa loves him a fedora.
This is a cool hat.
He definitely got told by the guy at the store that he's the only guy they've ever seen who could pull this off. Left field, Barry Bonds. You have to wonder if at some point Barry had an existential crisis while putting on his body armor and just thought,
too much fucking shit on me, I can't breathe.
Center field, Mickey Mantle. Mickey had his dangerous Knights crew of Billy Martin and Whitey Ford, and you know these would be the type of guys that would slop up some steaks at Trefani's. A custom that reminds me of Mantle's weird cocktail invention, which would pair beautifully with a sloppy steak. Mantle was out at lunch one day and a fan spotted him and asked the waiter to send over a very expensive glass of port to Mickey. Mantle nonchalantly poured the wine into his glass of vodka. The fan, horrified, ran over to tell Mickey what an expensive port that was, and Mickey replied, "Oh, we do this all the time. Absolute and port. We call it an abort."
It's really, really good.
Right field, Bobby Bonilla. The Mets bought out Bonilla's contract in 2000, and instead of paying $5.9 million outright, they chose to defer the payment, paying Bonilla $1.2 million for 25 years. Bonilla was like,
Even if I do a bad job, they gotta give me that other $2 million.
Worse than that, in fact. He doesn't even have to do anything. The Mets will be paying Bobby Bonilla until he's 72 years old, which is crazy.
It's kind of a cosmic gumbo.
At DH, we'll take A-Rod, who can back up third and short as well, while also being a wolf in the boardroom.
So there's 2 rules in investing as I see it. Rule number 1 is don't lose money.
Right.
Rule number 2 is don't forget rule number 1.
Yeah.
So don't try to give him any crap or he'll... Pitching staff. Steve Carlton was one of the most goated pitchers of the 1970s, and like the equally goated Richard Brecky, Carlton would
Never talk.
Like Jelly Bean, Lefty took a vow of silence, refusing to speak to the media for 8 years until finally, in 1986, he'd had enough of reporters doing this to him. And, like Richard Brecky, he probably wishes he'd kept his mouth shut. In this article, first published in 1994, Carlton elucidated his conspiratorial worldview, revealing himself to be a fairly standard-issue right-wing kook who thinks the world is controlled by 12 Jewish bankers. But also the US and Russia actually control everyone with sound waves. but it's actually the Elders of Zion, but also MI6. Oh, and a committee of 300 that meets at a round table in Rome every year. Like, pick one thing and go with it.
Figure out what you do!
Carlton also said, don't tell me that 2 + 2 = 4. How do you know that 2 is 2? That's the real question, which sounds like something you would say while high in your college dorm room or on the Joe Rogan podcast.
1 × 1 should = 2.
Carlton denied that he said any of that stuff in that article, and longtime battery mate Tim McCarver tried to help smooth things over with the media afterwards, but he should have been screaming this to Lefty before he agreed to that interview.
Don't talk!
Joe Niekro. Niekro's most infamous moment came when he got caught red-handed with a nail file and tried to pull the old,
we're all trying to find the guy who did this and give him a spanking.
Jack McDowell. This Cy Young winner was able to find a few hits in his Q zone, scoring an opening slot on tour with the Smithereens. If only View had a few more dollars to get their thing,
Really popping off.
could have had a huge hit with a banger like Palm Tree Girls.
Palm tree girls, the palm tree guy.
Next, we'll take 2 starters and 2 relievers who could use a dope tugging knob to keep their shirts from getting trapped on their bellies. Bartolo Colon and CC Sabathia for the rotation, and Jumbos, Diaz, and Brown for the bullpen. And maybe we could do a cross promotion and get them in an ad like this.
We're gonna make a big noise.
Are you ready for this? Are you ready for this? Are you ready for this now? Are you ready for this?
Okay, I'm gonna take one more starter that I'll convert into a swingman. Pascual Perez, who first got his driver's license in 1982 while a member of the Braves, but then realized
I don't know what any of this shit is, and I'm fucking scared.
he was driving to Fulton County Stadium one day for his start, but got lost on I-285 and couldn't find his exit, so he just kept looping around the city until his car ran out of gas. At which point he probably realized,
I can just run.
and I'll finish off the pitching staff with a guy who brings a sort of despised infant quality to the closer role. John Rocker was truly the Bart Harley Jarvis of MLB. Bench, we'll get an all-time pinch hitter in Gates Brown, who holds the career record for American League pinch hits. In what has to be the most perfect I Think You Should Leave synergy on this team, Brown, during a game in August of '68, had just grabbed a couple of hot dogs from the clubhouse to eat when he was called upon to pinch hit.
But it's lunch.
Brown stuffed the hot dogs into his jersey to hide them as he went up to the plate. Brown was quoted as saying, "I always wanted to get a hit every time I went to the plate, but this one time I didn't want to get a hit. I'll be damned if I didn't smack one in the gap and I had to slide into second, head first no less." When he stood up with mustard and ketchup and mangled hot dogs all over him, everyone on that field probably learned a valuable lesson.
You can't skip lunch. You just can't, guys.
Then we've got a bit of overkill at the catcher position. First off, Reese McGuire, who in February of 2020 was visiting a Dunedin, Florida mall, and I guess was like, I hope I don't jag off. Unfortunately, he did, and was arrested for indecent exposure. And we'll take Joe Garagiola, who had more success post-baseball, becoming a sportscaster and game show host. Garagiola hosted a whole bunch of game shows, many of them short-lived, including this one in 1987 called Strike It Rich, which looks to me like it would have been more of a hit if they'd had a chunky character or a metalloid maniac type of guy just zipping around like a bug. Instead, they were just like,
That's a good idea, dump it.
Garagiola also had this very Tim Robinsonian or Connor O'Malleyan rant in an outtake from a car commercial.
And I'm tired of it, Schwab, all day long. You sit on that truck like a big man. Well, I'm telling you, my own man's money's out of court. I don't need the goddamn job. And frankly, I don't want to hear your stories. And Dolores, I'm fed up with you, too. All you do is eat. All of you, to hell with you. And you, hippie, with your cantaloupe, all of you. Yeah?
And we'll add one more catcher with Mr. Baseball, Bob Uecker, who must have been the baseball player with the most appearances on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. And like Carson, a Uecker impersonator would have made a great addition to the stable of stars. At a price point that means
He can hit.
it would be the first time anyone would say that about Uecker, because, yeah.
He can't hit. He can't hit.
Outfield, Joe Pepitone. It was never a secret that Joe Pepitone wore a rug, so he'd have no use for the Wilson's 2-pay system. But maybe he'd want to get in on Gelutol. Either way, it's clear that Pepitone was a self-hating bald boy with a large cache of
Black, slick, back, hair wigs.
Then we'll take outfielder Sam Crawford, the all-time leader in triples, and we all know
triples is best. Yeah.
Then we're going to take a guy who actually never made it past A-ball, Randy Poffo, who would later go on to become wrestling legend Randy Macho Man Savage, and would have loved to slam Toilet Truck or Baby Duff onto the soft ground at Pacific Proposal Park.
I really hope Toilet Truck dies. I hope Baby Duff dies.
And finally, Buck Weaver, third baseman and shortstop from the 1919 Black Sox, who was banned from baseball for throwing the World Series. But Weaver maintained his innocence all along, requesting a separate trial, basically saying,
I didn't rig shit!
Which is true, as Weaver was not part of the conspiracy, but knew about it, and was found guilty for not informing on his teammates. Well, there we go. This team is
Simply too good.
But let me know in the comments what other guys you would put on your turbo team.
Yeah, guys.